second point I would like to mention is the question of NGOs and civil society. Yes, I mean, like, it's very important to bear in mind that the kind of toolkit, intellectual toolkit of the transitology was very much connected to this 1970s and 80s dissident political discussion, which was actually, as you can look at in the works of Václav Havel and others, was very much looking at the question of how actually the post 68 normalization society is also having certain elements of totalitarianism. Yeah? So I mean, this was a kind of revival of the totalitarian theory. I mean, nobody believed in the totalitarian theory anymore in the 60s because there was a convergence between socialism and capitalism in many ways. But in the 1970s, this dissident culture was turning back to some elements of the totalitarian theory and trying to show that behind the consumerism of the normalization regimes, there is a totalitarian ultimate element. And that, of course, predicated a certain kind of relationship of state and society, which is basically antagonistic. Yes, I mean, this is the moment of all the parallel police discourses and the kind of, like, you know, anti-politics and all that, which was, of course, very nice and very interesting and very morally fascinating, but of course it had a certain kind of understanding of the relationship of NGOs or civil society and state, which was basically conflicting. Yeah? So when in the 1990s this NGO sector is emerging, then the DNA, the institutional DNA of these institutions is about basically fighting against the state. In a context, and this I remember, I was born a bit earlier, so I already remember, but this was a moment when the state was extremely weak. Yeah? So basically there was no real resistance of the state against this sector, but the discourse about the state was basically that we have to create a parallel system, actually, and this is what the Soros Foundation, for example, was obviously doing in the early 1990s. And then, by the time they realized that actually the state is much less inimical to the NGO sector, also because for the state it was very easy to outsource certain things to the NGO sector, the situation changed, because by the time the NGOs realized that they need the state started to be much more resilient, partially because they were already irritated by the fact that the NGOs in the sector, or this kind of civil sector, is actually creating a parallel state, and partially because the state became reinforced, ironically, by European Union. Yeah, so most of these countries actually started to get resources with pre-accession and then also with accession process, which was actually reinforcing the state functions. All of a sudden, the money that you could get from Friedrich Ebert Stiftung for Education was peanuts compared to what came in from the European Union to build educational institutions, except for that the state at that point had no knowledge transfer whatsoever from the civil sector. These were parallel structures. And the state was actually very happy to basically reinforce its own etatist agenda. But at that point, the NGOs were actually trying to cooperate with the state, but they couldn't really. And this is the story of the 2000s, when, for example, CEU launches SPP, the School for Public Policy, and all that, with the idea that we will train, the state needs us, we will train the experts for the state, except for that by that time the state says that, okay, fine, basically, and we don't need you to teach us what to do. I mean, we have our own expertise, and then this is the moment where the state generates the Congos and the kind of parallel NGO sector, which is actually not cooperating with the NGO, and then of course we reach the early 2010s in Hungary, and let's say in other contexts as well, where you basically start to have a kind of pseudo civil sector. So I mean, like, this is actually not that the state gives up the civil sector, the state etatizes the civil sector and creates a pseudo civil sector, which is actually creating its own dynamics. It involves civil participation and all that, except for that we know that this is actually to demolish democratic, liberal democracy. And I would like to just mention quickly, and then I will pass the word to Kata and Attila, three more similar, I think, interesting cognitive dissonances. One is Europeanization. Yes, I mean, like, it looked like a kind of very monolinear story. I mean, it's you connect Europeanization to modernization, but we know perfectly well that this was also very much a cognitive dissonance, that on surface these political elites were actually adopting European patterns, but then there was an extreme resilience in the societies to actually go their own way. I mean, I will never forget, that was one of my best experiences. Actually, Gábor Kláncsa, who was here, organized at some point how Bologna was adopted. Bologna system was adopted in Eastern European countries workshop at CEU, and all the guys came from different Eastern European countries, and everywhere it was adopted. Yeah? So on surface, it was full full success, like Bologna everywhere. And then you ask the people individually that how does it look like in your country, and it turned out that everybody had a fantastic story about how the real adoption was dodged. But in all possible ways, depending on the local culture. So in the Russian case, they adopted it not because they wanted to be compatible with Bologna, they adopted it because they could drop the boys quicker to the army. Because if it's not 5 years, it's not 3 years, then it's much easier. In Republika Moldova, they adopted it, but they forgot to tell it to the European Union. So they basically created a full Europeanization of the system, except for that it's still not compatible because nobody takes their diplomas seriously. Then in Lithuania, they adopted it, but they decided that on paper they adopted it, but in reality their local institutions kind of completely tweaked. It's the same with Prague as well, that like they said that okay, it's very nice in Bologna, but I mean it doesn't concern us. And then it goes around, and then finally the Bulgarian representative, he was asked, and how is Bologna adopted? He said, we adopted it. And they said, and how does it work? He said that Bulgarian people survived the Turks, survived the Russians, it will also survive the Bologna system. And for me that was a very, very beautiful example of how it's two-level. And of course we know then, like the story, there's a lot of research about how adoption of European norms was kind of negotiated in a very specific way, and how European Union was actually paying money to those negotiators in the accession to the story, who were actually closing the chapters of the negotiation, the EU accession negotiation quickly. As soon as you close the chapter, you were promoted. So basically, if it was about rule of law or whatever, if the country signed that they are respecting all the things, the negotiator was promoted. So you can imagine how far he was or she was interested in actually getting real guarantees. I mean, the point was to, as quick as possible, go through. And the last one I would like to mention is memory politics or fight with the past. I think this is also something that on the paper looked very easy to understand and very easy to deal with. I mean, totalitarian heritages need to overcome, there is the beautiful German model of Vergangenheitsbewältigung and all that, but then there is this kind of very, very interesting local dynamics. First of all, I mean, just think about this, that there was a certain kind of time lag of anti-communism in most of these countries. So in the 1990s, when the West was expecting to have a kind of memory politics, anti-communist memory politics, there was very little of it, and if there was, it was very primitive. Yeah? So when there is a kind of more complex memory politics and very much anti-communist memory politics, it's like 10, 15 years late. Except for that this is not against the communists, it's against the transition elites. So from outside it looks like that this is finally these countries are coming to terms with their past. Maria Schmidt was happily opted into all possible German Lutheran foundations as a fighter for coming to terms with the totalitarian past in Eastern Europe, except for that her target was not the communists, because the communists were already in her own party. Her target was the actually liberals who were opposition guys in the 1970s and 80s, and who were actually in the 1990s were less anti-communist than anti-nationalist, and who became the target of this anti-communist discourse. And this was completely ununderstandable for the Westerners for a very, very long time. I mean, it took a decade or more for Anna Applebaum. I think she's, if you want to follow this discussion, then follow what Anna Applebaum was doing, who was lionizing all these Hungarian neoconservatives 10 years ago as fighters for coming to terms with the past. And when she realized that she was duped, she started to write this very strange kind of rejoinder that, you know, how is it that I was actually becoming friend with the Nazi? Very strange. And that is exactly showing very nicely how this kind of relationship was developing. But that was something that most of the Western external experts, they either misread it, they misread anti-communism as just a kind of a political tool in the 1990s, and then they rejected it completely, so they didn't want to deal with this. And many of the experts in Eastern Europe were Western leftists, for whom actually socialist countries were a kind of alternative modernity which they liked. And when in the 2000s, the other time, the conservatives were buying this kind of anti-communism, which was not really anti-communism, which was anti-transition. And again, this is what all the CSU guys all the time were buying, I think, from Orbán. And I just have a nice story to finish with, which I think shows very well this, that most of the time when somebody comes from Western Europe to this kind of, to explore Hungarian corruption showing like the government shows a film to this kind of, I don't know, European Union experts and shows that everything was destroyed here during communism, but now we are building the kind of future. And of course there are minor mistakes here and there, but in general. And then these guys go out and they say that yes, of course, I mean, compared to what you had, this destruction, I mean, of course you cannot expect that. And this coincides with the fact that, this is the last thing I would like to say, is that this Vergangenheitsbewältigung, as Matthias can also confirm, came very late also in Western Europe. So this time lag, which we know that it's a kind of dubious time lag, because they didn't purge the communists in the 90s, they started to purge the communists 25 years later when there were no communists left. This was actually coinciding with the fact that this is exactly how Western Europe was actually not coming to terms with the Nazi past immediately. It was 20-25 years later. So it's not that surprising for a German conservative that the immediate past is not negotiated, but somehow you need a generation. Except for that in our case, this need of a generation is not a genuine coming to terms with the communist crimes. It's actually a kind of political purge of the political enemies, irrespective of their involvement with the communist past. So I stop here, and I think this is one frame, and then you will get now two very different frames, and we can continue discussing.
Can you continue, or I guess I can continue. My perspective and the angle I'm taking is really quite different, but I will try to find some connecting points, and then I'm sure Attila will do the same. So I basically just wanted to talk a little bit about continuity as well as some new novel elements in higher education policy, specifically in Hungary since the transition. So just a little bit of a sort of description of what the higher education sector looks like now. It is a small sector comparatively. In 2016 there were 250,000 students enrolled total, and that includes everybody, you know, at undergraduate, graduate levels, also about 32,000 international students, which is being taught by about 20,000 university instructors and are being held by about 35,000 other higher education employees. And these higher education employees, as well as the students, are distributed across 65 higher education institutions, which can mainly be classified into state or public universities, church-affiliated universities, and then a few universities that are being maintained by private foundations. And the two main types, other than the maintenance structure, is that of universities of sciences and then universities of applied sciences. And the early story of the 1990s, or the way that it has been presented, has really been a trend that also played out in many of the other transition countries, which was the massification of higher education, so the number of students enrolling in both universities and then colleges, now called universities of applied sciences, really increased drastically, and that has continued up till the mid 2000s, and that's when enrollment numbers peaked, and then in the next 10 years, the enrollment numbers dropped by about 20%. So that's a quite substantial decline, and there has been a lot of talk, and I argue that a lot of the discourse now on higher education and what it means also tries to sort of contend with what caused this decline and what are the implications for it in the future. So one of the most obvious explanations is the demographic decline. I mean, simply the cohort of 18-year-olds who are graduating high school are declining. Again, in the same year that I had the last data from 2016, it was only about 120,000 18-year-olds, out of which only 70,000 actually took the matriculation exam, which is required for admission. The other explanation, in addition sort of the demographic decline, is the introduction of the Bologna cycle, which also has its sort of interesting adoption on paper, and then some interesting realities across the board. But what I wanted to focus here is, and I think what came as unexpected surprise, and in some way a unique characteristic of the Hungarian system, is that with the introduction of the multi-cycle system and the short-term bachelor's degrees, which typically now range from 3 or 3.5 years, they also contributed to this drop in enrollment numbers because actually a lot fewer people contributed into master's programs than expected. We tried to recently construct with some of my colleagues sort of a metric of how many people continue to master's programs in countries where Bologna was implemented. And some very crude estimate is that across the board, it's close to 80% in all of the Bologna countries, but then in Hungary it's actually a lot lower. I don't exactly remember the quota, but it's well below 50%. So a lot of people who previously stay longer in the system actually finish their bachelor degrees and then don't continue, and so that also contributes to the drop in numbers. And then there is also the matter of cutting the state-funded places, and I will come back to that. But arguably that has also contributed to declining enrollment numbers. And there's also sort of the increasing out migration of students, if you will, into institutions of higher education, mainly to other European countries, but also elsewhere. So just coming back for a second to the notion of the state-funded places. Hungary has this dual system of funding, which I think is a misnomer. I really dislike this sort of discussion of Hungary having a dual system. What it has is, in many ways, a system that has tuition fee and also sort of a state-funded scholarship that covers the entirety of the tuition fee for some of the students. And in a way, one of the stories of continuity in Hungarian higher education policy has really been a very clear ongoing decline in the proportion of students who received these state-funded slots or these tuition waivers, if you will. So in 2000, 92% of all of the students still received these state-funded slots. In 2010, it was 78%, and now it stands at 65%. And so that's something that is sort of something that characterized the system, regardless of government. I mean, there was one governmental policy that was sort of arching over governments. But then it's not just the actual cutting of the state-funded places, but also simply the mere discussion of further expanding private contributions to higher education that caused huge shocks to the system. So in 2006-2007 academic year, when there was the major serious consideration of introducing tuition fees across the board, there was a major dip in application numbers, and then again in 2013 there was a major dip in application numbers when the government introduced this student contract that basically tells students that they have to work for the same amount of time that they spent in higher education after graduation in Hungary, or else they have to pay back this tuition waiver. And so both of these have caused shocks to the system, and they arguably contribute to declining state numbers. I think that there's also an interesting story there that these declines have not happened across the board. So some of the disciplines have been specifically targeted for more of the cuts of the state funding places, but also some of the types of institutions were more affected by this. And so one of the stories that sort of seemingly fits this rhetoric of building a knowledge society and sort of using higher education to bolster innovation is the alleged sort of focusing of funds into STEM fields, and there has been sort of relative increase in the proportion of the students who are now enrolled at higher education institutions in Hungary who are in STEM fields, but at the same time it's really important to bear in mind that the absolute numbers are actually dropping in these fields as well. So it's not that there is this big restructuring where now more students are being channeled into STEM fields and fewer enrolling, but across the board there are fewer students enrolling in Hungarian higher education institutions. And then the other aspect that I wanted to mention in terms of how these changes and cuts policies are not targeting all types of universities equally is that I mentioned that the proportion of students who got the state funding places was dropping across the board, but actually in the universities that are being maintained by private foundations, this number is now down to 5%. So only 5% of the students who are enrolled at these private universities receive these state-funded slots. And in the public sector, it's around 67, I think, or 70%. Moreover, in the church-affiliated universities, that rate is much higher. So close to 80% of the students enrolled at these institutions are receiving state-funded slots. And these universities enroll approximately 12% of the entire. So they are not as big of a player as the state-funded universities, but they do enroll a substantial chunk, and they are in a sense in a better position now because they receive more scholarships for their students. And also one of the interesting points that István Polonyi made is that it's not just that proportionally they are receiving more funding, but also that their per capita amount of state funding is higher, which is especially interesting considering that these church-affiliated universities do not offer any medical training or veterinary training, so one of the fields that are more costly to offer from an ongoing effort. You can also really make the argument that higher education policy has been an extremely low priority field for the government, and despite these really controversial issues such as the discussion about the introduction of the tuition free or the student contracts, this has been very low on the agenda of any of the governments since. So funding for the entire sector has been really declining across the board, and that is not just manifest in the cuts to the state-funded places, but also it can really be seen in the proportion of the salaries that are being covered from state subsidies, so salaries of the instructors and salaries of the university staff, which is especially interesting because they continue to serve as civil servants, so they are being paid on a civil servant scale. And there used to be a regulation that actually all of the civil servants have to be funded through state appropriations or state subsidies. Now, not let alone 100%. Now it's actually lower than 70% of the salaries of Hungarian university staff that's being paid from state appropriations, and the rest is from other revenue sources. And I also just wanted to mention that despite the declining funding, the control of university governance seem to be sort of increasing. One interesting example that I wanted to highlight is the sort of the setting of the admissions course, which is being done centrally. And just connecting to Balázs's point about the parallel systems and the creation of parallel universities, one of the ongoing sort of still fresh in the news stories is about the privatization of Corvinus, if you will. So basically relegating the governance and the funding of the university to a private foundation. But interestingly, even though the argument is that this is going to be done to really increase the autonomy of the university in all matters, when leaders of the university were asked how it is going to affect admissions, they said, oh, this is going to continue to be made through the central admissions. So there is this interesting status of seemingly sort of giving more autonomy and more control over finances and governance, but then also retaining this really core university function of admissions through central admissions process. There are some other sort of examples of how control was being increased. One example is, for example, the introduction of the excellence funding and the structural funding, which are being done essentially through decisions through the ministry. So they are not being done either on a sort of formula basis or a competitive basis, which sort of gives more leverage for targeting based on other criteria, and of course the increased oversight of the funding for the Hungarian Academy of Sciences also connects to that trend, and I would argue that that's a new feature of higher education policy or research and science policy of the more recent years. But then also no, I think I'm going to sort of end the conversation here. I just wanted to again connect back to your Balázs's point about the establishment of the parallel sector. So I think that even though there is the story of continuity of decreasing funding, relatively low priority of higher education policy per se, that's sort of across the board. One of the new elements is this creation of parallel the higher education sphere as well. And so maybe the sort of, I wouldn't say increased prominence of church-affiliated systems, but sort of less of a cut and less of a marginalization of those institutions maybe is one signal of that. Again, what's happening to Corvinus is another signal of that. Of course, the establishment of the National University for Civil Services is also part of that story. So I think I'm going to end this here, and I look forward to continuing the conversation in the group.
Yes, I mean, it's so good to be the last. You have already, so many things have already been said, so I just can contribute to this. I would start with some general points, and then I would go into some specific kind of intellectual problems of what perspectives are missing and what things we should take on learning from the things. Because there's one thing, in case we have an adversity, then the first thing we have to do is to learn. So when you are under attack, the first thing you do is you start thinking very quickly what has gone wrong, and I think this is why we agreed on this, that we should have this discussion. The first thing which is super important is to have a self-reflective position. So what we have been doing, and then we have got a whole lot of things. To this I would like to add a couple of other problems and inequalities in the whole region. We always talk about some of the top universities here, but we always forget the provincial town universities, massive attempt on behalf of smaller communities to set up some kind of a school, and then the failures around this. This something is super important. Also, as a general point, I would like to say teaching out has become a problem. More and more people have been enrolled into the system in the relevant age groups, but I think that this kind of a teaching out, that is to say, university teachers and classes going out, let's say trade union schools or something like that, that has declined a lot, which I think is a super important social activity, which is to be supported. I am one of the founder of the Karl Polanyi Center. Karl Polanyi was writing the Great Transformation in a trade union, at the trade union school. So he was teaching in Britain at the trade union school. He was not at the top university when he was doing this. And look, you can do quite good things, right? Even that. So that's very important. The other general point I would like to make is that it has been partially touched upon, this kind of an education and research becoming too much project oriented. And we know that this is a very problematic system. This is a kind of a parallel system. So universities are supposed to give some kind of a general knowledge, but research and then teachers are very much involved in very specific project, streamlined things. And that I think is a major problem, namely the problem of basic research and doing some basic stuff, what you need to do in order to have specific ideas, and then the withdrawal of the national government. So when they are talking about national control, one of the first things they forget is to give money for basic national research. For instance, I'll just give you one, because I work also at the Demographic Research Institute, is that the creation of reliable, good basic statistics, right? Which is kind of bread and butter for every social scientist to live on, and then to get intellectual input into that, and then to manage it, and then to repeat it again and again. Then these are the things which are getting very, very problematic in all different ways. The next thing, in terms of self-reflection, at our research center we made a little bit of a research. This has just come out 2 weeks ago. It came out 2 weeks ago in a book on education in post-transition countries, and then we looked at 4 leading universities of this country, how the global society is represented. So that is to say, we are living in an extremely open world, and then we just wanted to look at the thing on the basis of the syllabus and the basic readings, what kind of key things are taught on global society. We were not completely surprised, but the scale actually surprised us, how awfully Eurocentric and in some ways ethnocentric the whole picture is. This mental map is really mind-boggling. For instance, when even at international studies, they teach all the time European Union, they teach all kinds of things related to this region, but they just simply forget Mercosur, all kinds of things which are just super important, right? So we looked at that in various things, various universities, various programs, and some of the programs are a little bit better, some are a little bit worse, but the overall picture is rather homogeneous, and then we found that. The next thing, just very quickly, because I have quite a number of things, we looked at the composition of authors as well, not just these topics, which are very important, but authors as well, and that was even more mind-boggling, that let's say 80% of the text of the compulsory reading, this is Hungarian authors, which means that, and then there are a little bit of Anglo-Saxon, minor German, and then we found one author from India. That was it, and it was really amazing. We also looked at the gender, not of just the authors, but as a topic as well, how much it is taught, and it was very, very low actually. But in terms of the composition of authors, I mean, you are not going to be terribly surprised that, let's say, 86% of the compulsory authors are going to be male, 14% are going to be women, and then basically we could just put together the whole thing. Let me simplify it so it's completely European male, kind of interpreted by Hungarian authors. That's basically the
Hungarian male authors.
Hungarian male authors, right? Reinterpret. This is the kind of knowledge we transfer, right, to students. So I think this is something which we need to take into account when we talk about what problems we are facing. I think this having a more critical global view, I think is super important, just in order to understand exactly the problems what we are seeing now. And then just let me sum up. Let's say, of course you can't do it, but let's say the governmental perspective, which is very much that we would like to achieve more control, and I'm just renting extra power of the West in order to achieve this control. And then this is like, let's say, kind of a summary of some of the key points they are talking about. And then, of course, the most interesting things, what type of a control they would like to achieve, and why that type of control they would like to achieve. And then looking at this perspective, which I take very seriously, because of course we can see that these ways of control, right? So I think one of the key buzzwords in the near future should be what other types of control would be more apt to handle some of the negative consequences of that and strengthen some of the positive aspects of that, because of course we have to have this kind of balanced thing. Now the first thing which I think is important intellectually speaking is really to take seriously the thing which has already been written down by so many people, is that to do this, the local analysis should be counterbalanced by a global, so we should look at this global-local interplay, which is actually the clear-cut example. I mean, those nationalism studies which would like to understand solely this, let's say, the Hungarian nationalism on the basis of what intellectual heritage and cultural heritage exists here is absolutely misleading, because it takes into account, or forgets the kind of a global context in which it is reacting to other forces which are also acting in a lot of ways. So I think we have to re-globalize the local stories, and I would give that example, which I think is a trap. In case we are not doing this in a critical way, then of course the nationalists are going to have, they are going to win the race immediately, because they have a narrative in a nation being suppressed by global forces. That's a very old story. So they already I think in case we are not taking this critically, then I think we are making a huge mistake. The next point I would like to mention is that really this kind of cyclical things which you can very clearly see in global history is that in order to go ahead, I mean now we can see this opening up phase is over. Now we are entering the authoritarian cycle, which is going to be with us for quite some time, right? I don't know. I mean, I am a bit older, so probably I can see the end of it sometime. Might not. I mean, you never know, right? And then I think, but in order to think very quickly, you have to think about the day after, right? So the tomorrow is already more or less set. The day after is not set. And for that, you have to go back to some of the previous periods to learn some of the things which have been forgotten. And I would like to, you know, which for me is very revealing, and this is what I'm also working on now, is going back to some of the debates of the 50s and 60s, which is about the issue of mixed economy. So we think that this control was not an issue before, but that's not true. Because this issue of control was there. I already mentioned, you know, and I can repeat, Karl Polanyi is one of the key thinkers, but even this morning, just preparing for this, I looked at Wilhelm Röpke, right? So quite different ideological things, when actually all the time was this question that market, yes, but in what way and under what control, right? So how it goes. I think intellectually we have to go back to these problems, and we have to work on this. Now, in brackets, you know, this is why Balázs is an exceptional professor, because he's teaching history of ideas. History of ideas, so we have to learn. So nobody can question me on Walras, or nobody can question me on Keynes, nobody can question me on Hayek, nobody can question, because I all had to go through all these people, read, and then comment, and then to go up to very serious exams going through. In case you look at these things now, this is gone. And then this is a kind of a suicidal thing, what we are doing, because of course people are not stupid, and of course previously they were already thinking about certain things. So now I'm saying that, guys, let's go back, reading seriously history of ideas of, you know, economic systems and so on, in order to figure out what type of mixed economy is going to be okay, which is going to calm down things, which is going to be able to tame this kind of an authoritarian nationalist cycle at the end, and then to go back and then to provide some basic minimum living throughout the world, right? So how to do it globally? The key question, I can frame it very nicely, is that which is the system in which one of the, let's say, form of integration like redistribution or market is not going to eat up the other one, which is going to be a balanced one. The market is, it can be totally totalitizing, right? This is what we have seen, right? This kind of a market utopia has been taught to you as well, perfectly, in sociology as well, they teach it. So it is able to take over all aspects of social life, and then even intellectually it can be very hegemonic. How to counterbalance it? And I think this is super important. Now for that reason, and this is where I just one additional point at the end, to be even more concrete, is that let's go back to some issues of memory politics as well, right? What to do with state socialism? Because all kinds of things are taught about state socialism, but I think some of the key points are completely forgotten. Namely, we have an enormous ideological critique of that, right? I don't want to go into this debate, totalitarianism debate. I think this is bullshit in between us. To use it in different socialism, and very importantly, different phases of socialism, right? In the case of capitalism, nobody is making equal the 300-year-old story with a couple of decades. He could, but it's not very, you know, revealing. And just the other way around, so, you know, types, forms, and so on, they're very different, but this is not the only debate I would like to go into. We have this very ideological, we have a lot of things about everyday life. There's a dramatic interest is that how they were making love with each other, and then what kind of things they were eating in the kitchen, and so the gender relation, everything. Fine, but some of the key, let's say, economic policy issues which they faced when, for instance, combining planned economy with market is forgotten. And actually, I don't want to reveal it and then to say, let's do it. Go back to these things critically, because it seems that, let's say, in not all the countries, but in some of the countries, there were periods when there were rather successful attempts to make these combinations. And I think we should go back to that. In case you go back to the popular memory, why they are revolting today is that they are talking about, oh, we had a very nice life in the 1970s. Well, thank you very much, but nobody's going back and asking the question how that kind of a system could be established and then to be thought over. So the only thing I would like to say is that I think we have to really open up and then to talk about alternative ways of control which are not having these problems what the nationalists control, or at least let's put it this way, because even we overestimate this control, there's much more continuity in the economic policy than you think. So not this, I would say, nationalist symbolic control. So what is the some kind of a real control which would make life more balanced of everyday people, less tense, less, more stable, more local, and so on. Okay, and the very last thing which I just want to raise is one more topic, because I see here a big intellectual trap, and then actually this is going to cause a lot of headache for us. In the 1960s, basically left-wing intellectuals were making this link between politics and science, right? That is to say, they were opening up that science was also very political, right? And now actually this tool has been taken by the radical right. And actually, of course, I'm not saying that they are doing it correctly, though, don't misunderstand me. The only thing I'm saying is that now they use it as a knife, these things, and then this is how they read it back. I think there's a dramatic task in front of us to think about this again, politics and science, what it means, how science can come back, and so on. I have my own answer, but I don't want to monopolize it. I think it's a very important topic.
Okay, so I think we will basically force into discussion, and I'm very much hoping that these issues are issues for you, and they are actually raising questions for you and comment. While you are thinking, let me just mention one thing, is that irony, and this is the irony of intellectual history, if I can put it this way, that the liberalism, the corrective liberalism that you are describing, like with Röpke and all that, so the ones who are kind of trying to bring in somehow the restriction of the market in the 1930s and kind of negotiate this, it's a tradition that was called neoliberalism at that point. The only difference between not the only difference, but the difference between what Attila is saying and what they were saying is that they were usually thinking about national economy that is able to do this, and then it was relatively easy to shift in from this into an anti-liberal opposition and actually become even possibly fascist, as in the Romanian case, or become
one question I have about the point that Attila made. Why is it that it was mostly the left and the liberals that destroyed history of ideas at the universities? Beginning from the 60s in the United States, I mean, it's a long process. You could also see the same with the Social Democrats in Germany. So this elimination process.
The thing which has changed a lot, and instead of that you have to go into films and then and so on and so on, and that's the way how you can actually get certain ideas there, which I find problematic, but I don't want to just to complain. So that would be one thing. So history of ideas is a burdensome. Why to look at them, right? And actually even they forgot even not only that was the best possible system, but also even that a mixed system at least, right? For instance, the constitution of this country in 1990 was clearly saying that there was an equality of different ownerships, right? And then by 1992 it is completely forgotten. Everything is privatized by bank, and it was already in the constitution. Be used by nationalists as well. Look how brave we are, how unorthodox we are, because they go back to some of the ideas that I don't know whether it's an answer to you.
But I think probably you also have to factor into it that I think in the 1960s, in one way or another, for the political left, especially in Western Europe, there were two elements in history of ideas that were irritating. One was history, and the other is ideas. Yeah? So I think basically what you have, this is the moment where social history, of course, is taking over, and you say that the ideas are somehow bound to pre-modern, conservative, hierarchical societies, and then you don't want to study this, you want to study basically structures and all that. And the other one is that there was a kind of shift away from history as a kind of framework of understanding things and moving towards more quite presentist toolkits, which were actually partially by behaviorism, as you mentioned, but also, this is the moment where historical sociology was actually becoming less and less historical. Yes, but it has a certain kind of meta history there, but it's not less and less historical engagement. It is about big models which you are testing, that you are not really feeling actually data. So I think in a way it was very much the spirit of the age, and that had an impact on the educational system, and I think it had an impact on demand, because what students learn is what they want to teach, and then it's kind of like
political science departments in America, at least because I went through one in a very classical style, was that there was one small section reserved for political philosophy, but this was varying very much from history of ideas because it wasn't so contextual. It was more like, here's a couple of sort of large schemes from modern history of political thought, but it's presented to you in terms of argumentation. So it's very much this analytic philosophy type of
philosophical classics education, all the way that normally a English gentleman would need, because you don't need, in order to have history in Ghana, something, you don't need that. You need something more practical, but they were somehow trying to, like Ernest Baker and all those people, they were kind of making this structural compromise between the traditional education and the more practical education. Became this kind of exercise, and it's not by chance, by the way, that half of the Cambridge schools are children of colonial administration. Yes, so I'm like Skinner was growing up, I think, in Ghana, the others in Nigeria. So and these were all the children of the actually colonial administrators. So there was an element of. So we shouldn't also be naive to believe that history of ideas is not a power tool in one way or another. Yes, and it was a power tool of a certain kind of political elite reproducing itself, and I think that's also part of the story. Yes, but of course, historicization is also a power tool, but it's also an analytical strategy. And I think what we are pleading for is not to restore German departments, I think, of the 10s or British departments of the 1950s, but rather basically to turn to the phenomena that we are talking about with an analytical and historical toolkit as well. And I think that even includes policy. Yes, I mean, when we are talking about policy, then it's very easy to look at only the structures of policy making and the kind of mechanism but actually what we have to look at what kind of ideas the guys had who were actually opting for these policies. And I think this is to complete this. So I mean, when I was trying to develop this kind of points, it was behind that it's a project that we were trying to consider with some points about trying to understand what was in the mind of experts. So the in-between people who are neither the Havels nor the street people who were just basically subjected to these policies, but the people who were actually, in a way, condensing how different models to each other or experimented and drawn.
I will ask one question from Wanda immediately, but one more point. Sorry, Kota. Sorry. That I think it is related to this question of why history of ideas have. It's also, let's be reflective of some of the critique of this intellectual heritage, from the point of view of, this textual turn like, Foucault, or let's say even from Lukács you can go like this, that you start, deciphering what kind of things, how to reject these texts, right? instead of how to use it in some ways, right? And then this is why you have this so primitive debates, let's say, was Marx Eurocentric? And then this is used as an argument not to read Karl Marx,